Hey everybody, I'm Joseph, and today we're going to talk about making a winter kitchen garden. This is the perfect time of year that we're all stuck inside and can't do any gardening, or maybe you're not really even a gardener, but you've been stuck inside with the pandemic, and you want something fun and creative to do and give a little bit of greenery to your home. We're going to go through a few different ways that you can create a winter garden and incorporate it into some of your decor in your kitchen, and have an abundance of greenery growing, whether it's vegetables or flowers, and how you might be able to utilize some of them throughout the winter. And today we have the distinct pleasure of having the garden editor of Martha Stewart Living, Melissa Ozawa, join us during our Q&A session. So after the presentation, she's going to be coming on to join us and answer some of your questions, and also talk about some of the fun and inspiring things that they have going on over at Martha Stewart Living. So there's a couple different ways that you can create your own kitchen garden. You can either do it by planting seeds. You can buy some already developed plants at your garden center and pot those in some soil. And you can also use some kitchen scraps from everyday cooking. And some of the things that are wonderful to use are onions and celery, garlic. We've got pearl onions. Romaine lettuce is fantastic to root and regrow. So when you're cooking and you're cutting off the ends of all of your vegetables, think about which ones might reroot and regrow. And we're going to go through some of that today. So one of the ways that you can start seeds right in your kitchen using things that are left over without having to go out and buy a bunch of pots is actually these egg containers. These are just these plastic tri-fold egg containers. And if you save them, they cut them apart into 3 sections, and they make wonderful seed starters. And it also provides you with a tray that will collect the water when you're watering them. The other thing it provides is when you're starting seeds, you need to have somewhat of a humid environment for them. So the top can also serve as a little bit of a greenhouse top for your seeds to get them started. So this one we're going to plant with some lettuce seeds. So creating a seed tray is really easy. All you have to do is just poke a small little hole in the bottom of each one of these containers, and go ahead and place it in your tray. This is going to hold the water, and then you're going to fill it with loosely packed potting soil. And we're just going to scatter a few seeds in each little cell. You don't want to overpack them, so try to only get about 3 or 4 in each one. Right on top is just fine to do. The lettuce that we're planting today is a red leaf lettuce. Red leaf is a really hardy lettuce that's very easy to grow. And then just slightly press down your soil to press the seed into it. And then you'll see that each little egg container is one little pod of growing medium. And what's nice is that when these start growing and the roots start binding all the soil up, these will be very easy just to pick out and repot into a clay pot or some other type of vessel that you might want to put it in. Sometimes even using washout cans from pureed tomatoes when you're making a tomato sauce makes a really good container for growing lettuce in. And then you're going to want to just lightly mist each cell with water. You don't want to saturate the soil so that it's soggy wet. And once it's nice and moist to the touch, and we are going to put our little dome on top. This is going to create a little bit of a greenhouse effect. And this is going to go in my windowsill. And I don't secure this too tightly for 2 reasons. I don't want to create so much moisture that these are going to mold. So this allows me just to tilt it to the side when it's really bright and sunny out and there's a lot of heat building up in there, and then to put it back on during the cooler times of the day so that it keeps the humidity and the moisture within. And the nice thing about using these egg crates is that they really do fit very nicely on a kitchen windowsill. Another great container for starting a windowsill kitchen garden are these pint-sized ice cream or soup containers. They hold water, so they're waterproof, and the lids actually become a really great saucer to place it in, so that if you do overwater it, the water will just seep out, but this is also somewhat watertight. So it will hold a little bit of water to keep it from going all over your windowsill. So this is another way that I like to start seeds. And one of the seeds that I love to start for indoor gardens, they're very easy to grow, and it's a very resilient plant, is borage. Borage is a very woolly type of an herb, and it has a little bit of a cucumber type of a flavor. What I love most about it are the purple flowers that it grows. They have a very spicy flavor, and the flowers can be used in salads or for garnish on trays or on dishes when you're entertaining or serving a meal. And I'm just going to put 5 or 6 seeds in here to get them started, and I'm going to press them down. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to mist the soil so that it's wet but not soaked. And these are also going to go in our kitchen window. I have chosen these beautiful aged terracotta rectangular planters to use for my indoor kitchen garden. And the reason that I chose these is because they take up a lot less space on a counter or near a window on a small table than round pots do. And before you pot these, you really want to have a nice sterile environment for your plants to grow indoors so that they don't get any type of a disease. And the best way to do that is to take a very mild solution of rubbing alcohol mixed with water in a spray bottle and just mist the insides of your planters. And that will kill any fungus or disease that's in there that might rot your plants or cause them to have some issues. So my kitchen garden this year is going to be filled with some different types of kale, some herbs. I've incorporated some pansies in here and also some strawberries. Strawberries make really good plants for growing indoors. And when I do a kitchen garden, I choose plants that are cold hardy plants. So these are plants that would normally grow in the fall and very early spring. These are all very hardy and cold hardy plants that will thrive indoors with just a little bit of tender loving care, some sunlight, and the proper amount of water. I also chose pansies because the flowers are edible and they can be used really beautifully to garnish dishes or again to put in a salad, just like the borage can. The other thing we're going to incorporate into it are some of our kitchen cuttings that I've saved along the way while cooking. And we're going to include some celery, some onions, some garlic. We're going to do some romaine lettuce. And I have also started 2 potatoes, which won't really be edible, but they will grow a potato vine, which will be really gorgeous spilling out of the pot when they are growing. I have these really beautiful strawberry plants. I want to flank each one of these pots with a strawberry plant so that when it grows, it's going to spill out from the bottom. And I don't want to plant it too deep, but I'm going to set it in the soil just deep enough so that I can put a small layer on top where I'm not covering the crown of the plant, but I'm bringing the soil just right up to the top of it. Now, I like to keep my planters separate. So I want to keep herbs in one, my kale and my flowers in another. And then I will start one with just the cuttings from the kitchen so that I can truly monitor how they're growing and if they need to be pulled or replaced or whatever. So the first one I'm going to do are my winter kales. And it's very easy, just pull them out of their cell. And if they've got any wilted or bad looking leaves, just pick them off. You want a nice clean plant in there. And go ahead, same thing. You want to do it deep enough that I can add a little bit of soil to the top, but I don't want to cover the crown of the plant. So here are some of the really good kitchen things that work well and grow in a kitchen garden for you. Celery is a wonderful thing. It's very easy to grow. You can already see I've been soaking this in water for about a week now, and it's already got new shoots coming up. We've also got a potato. You may have noticed some of the little eyes on a potato that grow when they're in a bag at a grocery store or whatnot. But if you cut that potato in half or into sections and skewer it with a few toothpicks or some skewers and lay it on a glass of water, just so that the bottom touches, you'll see that vine of the potato will start growing out of the eyes. And pretty soon this will be a very beautiful leafy potato vine. And because this is not going to regrow another potato per se, it's going to make a potato vine, I'm going to tuck it underneath the strawberry so that I'm not really going to need to get at the potato, but this is just going to make a beautiful display that will be coming out from underneath the strawberries. The other thing that I love to cut and regrow are scallions. And I'm just, much like a regular garden, I'm going to create little rows of scallions. And so the nice thing is that when these grow, I can actually just keep cutting the scallion tops off as I need them. And I really won't have to buy scallions for the rest of the season. So it's a great way to conserve on money. This is also a great activity to get to do with your kids and to teach them about reusing things, reusing the foods that they cook with rather than just throwing them away, and how to think about the economics of running a proper kitchen. That's part of what home economics is, thinking about the cost of things and the ways in which you can reuse things so that you don't have to keep buying them. You can preserve the environment. And, you know, it really is great for the soul to grow some greenery and get your hands into some dirt and watch something actually grow that you've tended to. There's a lot of satisfaction in that. The next thing that I'm going to plant in here are these little pearl onions that I've gotten. And while these are not going to regrow another onion, it will grow green onion tops. And eventually, if I let them flower, it will grow an onion flower. And again, an onion flower is edible and can be added to salads. It can also be added as a garnish to different types of soups. If I actually let the onion flower and go to seed, I can actually reuse those seeds to plant more onions. And so you can start your own self-cycling garden without constantly having to buy garden seeds. Towards the back of the planter, I'm going to add my celery plug. Romaine lettuce is a very easy lettuce to regrow just from the bottoms when you're making a salad. You just cut off the bottom, pick off any of the dead or rotted leaves around the bottom, hydrate them in some water for about a week or so. You'll start seeing little bits of roots starting to poke out, and just gently plant them right in the soil until the tops are flush with the soil. And you will start seeing a whole fresh new head of lettuce grow. And so essentially what we're growing here is a lettuce garden. We've got our lettuce, some celery, some onions, some scallions. And when the strawberries bloom, we can put some strawberries and some fresh pansies in it and make a really nice winter salad. And another really great plant that we never think of growing from the seed is actually indoor cactuses. It does require a different kind of soil, and most garden centers have mixes that are already created for cactuses, which is a mixture of sphagnum peat moss, sand, perlite, so it drains very easily. But it's only about a handful of seeds, and you don't want to spread these out. You really want these cactuses to sort of grow in this pot to make it really beautiful presentation in a big clump. So I'm going to scatter these seeds as they fall, one bag of seeds to a whole pot of soil. These make a really wonderful gift thing too. So if you can get some clay pots and get a few of these started to where they've got little baby cactuses growing, it's a really nice, unique gift to give somebody that's totally unexpected. And it's a really easy to care for plant because they don't require a lot of water. Rather than just keeping these on their drip trays, add a little layer of sand to the tray that the pot can sit on. It makes a really nice looking pot to begin with because you associate a cactus with sand in the desert. But what it does is it traps in the water that spills out and creates some moisture by keeping the sand moist. And that moisture will it makes a little bit of a microclimate, and that moisture will just radiate up around the plant just enough indoors to give it the humidity that it needs, like it would be outside in a hot environment. And so here we are setting up our kitchen garden, getting ready for the winter. Something that I love to use when I'm putting in pots in my house are these really large boot trays. They're actually meant to hold muddy boots and stuff, but they're watertight. And if I do need to clean them, they're large enough. They're very easy just to take apart and clean. But here we set up our kitchen garden here because we've got these beautiful windows that stream in a lot of light to help the plants grow. With a little bit of work and not a lot of money, you can create your own kitchen garden for the winter that you can grow herbs and vegetables and flowers and edibles and things that will regrow and regenerate over and over and over. We now have our special guest coming up, the garden editor of Martha Stewart Living. So stay tuned and we will see you in just a few moments.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have Melissa Ozawa, who is the garden and features editor of Martha Stewart Living with us. And we're just going to talk a little bit about starting indoor gardens and buying and sourcing seeds. And if anybody has any questions specifically for Melissa, please leave them in the Q&A chat box. And if it's a specific question for her, go ahead and mention that. But even if it's not a question about gardening, maybe you have a question about something that's happening at Martha Stewart Living, feel free to ask. We're here to have a great conversation. Melissa, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you. So how long have you been gardening?
I've been gardening for at least 20 years. I was born in Tokyo, and one of my favorite early memories was seeing just the cherry blossoms. So I've always been drawn to that and drawn to flowers and the irises. And so that's been something I've always loved. And so I have a little vegetable garden upstate, about a couple hours north of the city. And then I have a little outdoor space in the city where I try to cram as much stuff as possible and lots of houseplants.
Yeah. Good old New York City living.
Exactly, right?
I've been there, of course.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, if you're okay with it, we're gonna swap between questions and having some conversation. I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about gardening, how do you start your seeds? I know you like to order seeds from various catalogs and stuff. Yeah. So how do you start yours?
Well, it's very similar to what you do. This past year with the pandemic, when everybody was ordering as much as possible and staying at home, I wasn't able to get to the nurseries or to buy the things I normally would. So I was using cardboard egg cartons. I had a giant bin that I usually keep soil in. And so I transferred that out, put the egg cartons in there, planted my seeds, and sort of did the same thing that you did. I did need to supplement with a grow light because I didn't have as much sunlight living in New York City as you would if you're in a house with, we can pick your window.
And in Florida, so that helps.
Exactly, and Florida is a very different thing. Yeah. So, but basically did the same thing. I think one thing to add to what you did is that once you see your first set of leaves, that's when I usually keep them in a kind of warm spot until the first set of leaves appear, and then I put them in the bright light. And then once they get their second set of leaves is when I transplant them into a larger pot. Found a thing called cow pots, which I love, which are made out of, they're made out of cow manure. Oh. Obviously treated and cleaned up. But they can be planted directly into like peat pots, but not a little more environmentally friendly. Okay. And they can be planted right into your garden when they're ready to go out, and they come in various sizes. They're great.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. I've actually never heard of them, so I'm going to
Yeah.
look that up.
Look them cow pots, very easy name.
We do have a question which I think helps to pertain to this, which is how often do you water the seeds in the egg containers?
Well, I
How,
would
how
just
do
keep
you do
them,
that?
yeah,
You
just
mist
keep
your,
them moist, right? You want
yeah,
them to never to dry out totally.
yeah,
So I had a spray bottle, which I saw you had,
yeah,
or I just kind of drip, but you don't
yeah.
want to overwater them, right?
Yeah, I think for me, I always use a spray bottle because it's easier to control the rate of water
Hmm.
that you're putting on them versus either trying a sprayer in a on a sink or even putting the sink on very low. It's just too much water at one time for those little seed pods. So I think the best, a $3 plastic bottle and just keep some water in it and keep misting your
Hmm.
seeds works
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah. You don't want them to dry out and you don't want them to be waterlogged because then they'll rot and
Yeah.
they'll die.
Which I've had lots of experience
Oh,
with.
yeah.
It's so disappointing. um, so here's a question. My kitchen plants always get little gnats or no-see-ums. How do you keep those under control? Have you ever had experience with that?
I have. I think a lot of it is based with, it comes with the soil sometimes, or you buy a
Mhm.
plant from a place and they've got stuff in there and you bring it home and then
Yeah.
all of a
And
sudden
then
they're
it's under
everywhere.
control.
I mean, one thing you could replace your soil, just make sure you're getting, buying from a reputable place.
Yeah.
Making your own compost, I think is key, even in New York City. I
Yeah.
haven't convinced my husband yet, but my brother and sister-in-law have a worm bin in their New York City apartment,
Yeah.
so they can, compost as much as they can.
And
Um,
let me ask you, does it smell
yeah,
when you do that? Because I think people have this misconception that
no,
keeping something
that's
like
when,
that will smell.
yeah, no, that's when things are gone wrong.
Yeah.
Compost should always smell just like the earth. It's when things have, you put too much, green stuff or it's too wet. That's when it smells, but it should never smell bad. So that's a good point to make.
Yeah.
And it's pretty compact, and they can't do a ton of stuff. And worms are only so big, but yeah. So I think the other thing is also not to keep things. Sometimes if you let the soil dry out a little bit, if it's a larger plant or a plant that can handle it, that also can take care of. I think a lot of these little winged creatures tend to survive in moist,
Mhm.
wet, damp soil. So if you kind
Yeah.
of let them dry out, that's another way of getting rid of them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I have found, for me, when I've gotten them, I have found that it's usually, I think the biggest problem is the larva that's in the soil, and that's mostly when it's too wet. So
Hmm.
usually just letting it dry out for me has always worked, not to the point of the plant dehydrating, but
Right.
letting the soil dry out. And you usually don't have as many of them as you normally would.
I agree.
Let's see. What part of the celery do you sprout? From Susan. So Susan, when I use a lot of kitchen cuttings because I cook all the time, and I don't like to waste things, and I want to regenerate food from it. I think we have a big problem with people throwing away food today, and
Mhm.
especially at this time now where people are really hurting and suffering for food. So if I can do my part to save and allow other people to go to the grocery store, get their food from resources, and I can grow some for myself, I like to do that. And it's really just the bottom of a clump of celery. So rather than pulling off your stalks piece by piece when you're cooking, just chop a good 2 to 3 inch portion off the bottom of your celery and set that just so the bottom rim of the celery is in some water. And that will start your roots to start growing. And then as soon as you start seeing some roots plop out, go ahead and just throw it in some soil. And, like I said in the video, not really any type of lettuce, but most of the hardier, firmer lettuces like a romaine, they work well. They really work so well to regrow and regenerate. And the ones that I potted on Saturday are already about 1 inch to 2 inches out of the little plug that I had. So they grow pretty fast. Yeah.
That's great.
Um,
I think that's fantastic to do, to kind of keep growing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Melissa, when you start seeds, when do you transplant them?
When they get their second leaves, usually the first leaves are just the ones that come out of the seed, so they look almost like these little, like what child drawing of a leaf, right? And then when the second leaves come, they're the true leaves, the leaves that will come that will be eventually the plant, like a tomato plant or a pepper or whatever it is. Once you get those, I think maybe 2 or 3 of those, then I think they're ready to transplant. You don't want to keep the roots too small, so you want them to grow. The longer the roots can grow and spread, the more they're able to tackle a little drought or any sort of conditions. So you want them to move them into, and you just have to be careful, like gently pulling them up. You don't want to disturb them too much, and then put them into a larger container.
And do you have a certain, if you're going to transplant them and then move them outside, do you have any advice for that? Because I know a lot of people that do that, they put them outside and then they die.
Well, you have to kind of gently introduce them into the water. It's like when you're going into the ocean, and I mean, I guess some people just jump right in, but not me.
Not me.
I'll take a toe first, and then I'll take then I go up to my ankles. So you kind of want to do that. You want to take them out during the sunlight and the daytime, and then bring them in at night if it's cold, and then slowly starting adjusting them and getting them used to what the temperature is. That's one thing I should say, that what I do is I work backwards from the last frost date. Not something you have to contend with really, Joseph, in Florida, but where I am up in the Hudson Valley, you need our last frost date is the end of May usually. So then if a plant takes 6 or 8 weeks to germinate, to become plants, then you kind of work your way backwards, and that's when you start to plant. So you look at your seed packet and find how long it takes, and then work your way backwards from when the last frost date is.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, that's great. I have a comment from somebody. Actually, it's a question too, but she says she loves your work and she loves the magazine, and was curious if you do any of the photography for the magazine.
I do not. No, we have real professionals who do that. We have some, that's one of the things that's so amazing working at the magazine, aside from my colleagues and working for Martha herself, is that these photographers who can capture just
They're amazing.
The most amazing things. They really are. And one thing I've learned, being a garden editor for so long, is getting the right light, and that's one thing I think they're really great at. So it's shooting at first light at dawn, and shooting at dusk, and just capturing those moments. Wonderful.
It's funny. I got my start in my career in New York freelancing for Martha by mail, and it was really my first experience working with lifestyle photographers. And it just I going through high school and stuff, I mean, I always got Martha's magazines, and so how does it just look so beautiful? And then being behind the scenes, you really learn about it. And I mean, people don't realize it's such a talent that photographers have to be able to capture the look and the feel of what something is. It's something that I don't have, but I admire them because it really is.
Yeah.
And you get to work with them all the time, so I'm a little jealous of that.
Sometimes you're at this gorgeous garden and the light is perfect, and you're like, this is my job? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful.
So Melissa, somebody asked, would both of you share about interesting stories of how you inspired friends and family with your gardening endeavors? Do you have anything off the top of your head that you can think of?
Well, one thing is that I've gotten my nephews. I have a lot of nephews, and this year they built their own. A group of them built their own raised beds. Oh, nice. They planted potatoes, carrots, cucumbers, all on their own. I mean, because we've been so distancing from them, so I can only 6 feet away can tell them where to plant and where to go. But they did it all themselves, and then they start. They're young, and they started eating vegetables that they wouldn't normally have eaten. And I've gardened with them for a long time, and so they finally took it on their own and did it themselves, and really kind of hopefully they're going to be lifelong gardeners.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
How about you?
Well, mine not so much for when I was younger. I started my first garden, I think, when I was probably 10 years old, and I think I built a pond with it. It was, looking back at a picture of it now, it's like, oh God, how awful. But, I think for me, most recently, I have a friend here that lives in my neighborhood, and we've gotten to become very close, and she has a fantastic yard. And you know, Florida's the type of environment that if you don't maintain your gardens all the time, it just gets overgrown because everything grows so fast. And this year I saw her clear out the whole side lot of her yard. And, you know, she has 2 young kids and she got them involved with the gardening, and they started creating all these little rooms out of the overgrown shrubbery by pruning them back. And, you know, to hear her say it's so therapeutic to get my hands in the garden and just sort of release from the day of stress. I love hearing people say that because I don't think people get it until they've actually done it. And, you know, some people, and you don't have to be sort of, I mean, I garden every day. If I could be in there all day, I would be in there all day. And some people don't have to be that militant about it, but, you know, an hour in the soil really is rejuvenating to the soul. I'm sure you agree with that. Because
I attest to that, definitely.
You kind of get hooked on it.
You do, and you notice things that you wouldn't normally notice. And then you also appreciate, I mean, when you grow your first tomato, that is the best tomato you've ever eaten. And it is, because you kind of have nurtured and raised it. And
it's funny moving down here. So I never grew citrus fruit. And being in Florida, I've got 6 lemon trees, I've got a key lime tree and 2 kumquats.
Envy.
Well, it's a learning process. So I screwed up several times, and, you know, you just have to keep doing it because that's how you learn when you garden. And I mean, I was amazed after all the struggles that I had, I finally had one lemon tree put out this lemon, and no lie, it was about the size of my head. It was huge. But I felt so proud and I didn't want to eat it. So I put it on the windowsill and looked at it every day. Right. But that's what gardening is about. It's trial and error, and it's learning. And, you know, you read books and you educate yourself, but you really don't fully absorb it until you get in and you actually start doing it. So, so speaking of that, where do you like to source your seeds from?
Great. I just got a bunch of seeds in the mail. So seed catalogs, which is always one of my fun moments. Well, I do a lot of vegetable growing in the summer. So I love Kitazawa seeds. I'm half Japanese, so it's a seed source that specializes in Asian vegetables. So I buy a lot of my Japanese cucumbers there, shiso, shishito peppers, Japanese peppers. So that's and herbs there. So that's a great source. They're based in California. I think they're over 100 years old. Really, really good place to order seeds and to try new things, try new vegetables and varieties. Johnny's is great. Maine Seed Savers Exchange for heirloom seeds. And Hudson Valley Seed Company, which is a kind of more of a local, again, also heirloom open pollinated vegetables. And flowers, Florette out in Washington State. Erin Benzicane was one of our American Made winners way back when, I think 2014 maybe. And she has these incredible seeds, but they sell out quickly. So you've got to really get on it and monitor when she's offering them, because she releases them and then they're gone. And
then that's it. Does she get all of her seeds from what she grows?
She's doing all different things. Finding them from other places. For people who
don't know Florette, she has this amazing garden out in California where she
Washington. She's in Washington.
In Washington, sorry. Where she grows all of her flowers, and she has a book that's out, and she does the most amazing floral work. But her farm is absolutely inspiring and just so beautiful. And to see how somebody turned that into a lifestyle and a business, and it's thriving, and it's just so wonderful to see.
And she's one of the nicest people, and her husband and her family. They're just great.
I've never met her, but her books are very inspiring.
She has a new one. I think if it's not out, on dahlias. We did a story in September of her dahlia garden, which was incredible.
I'm sure.
Select Seeds also is just another one. They specialize in sort of old-fashioned seeds. Like, you can get these scented flowers that are just amazing, annuals and perennials, and they're based in Connecticut, and really good.
Oh, great. Yeah. So most of the seeds that I use, I don't do a ton of vegetable gardening, but I do a lot of flowers and perennial gardening,
Mm-hmm.
more so when I lived in New England. But I used to use Baker Creek.
Oh yeah, another
Yeah,
great heirloom everywhere. Yeah.
heirloom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to get a lot of sunflowers and zinnias from
Mm-hmm.
them to grow. And speaking of seeds, just so all of everybody who's watching knows that there are some seeds that you can plant that germinate and grow very easily without potting indoors.
Yes.
Zinnias, sunflowers, even cosmos.
Nurseries.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
nasturtiums. I grow them here. I love them.
I bet.
But you can literally just scatter those in your yard, and if you just want to sort of be surprised at what grows and grab a few things of seeds and mix them up and toss them on your soil, rake them in, keep them hydrated, and just see what kind of garden blooms. And it's a very non-committal way for you to really try your hand at growing something and seeing if it's something that you like. And I guarantee if you do, you're going to want to do more of it for sure.
Exactly.
Let's see, I have another question. If you're traveling and can't water for a few days or even weeks, do you have any suggestions for how to keep them hydrated?
Well, it can be tricky. I this past last year I bought these terracotta kind of spikes that you invert wine bottles in.
Mhm.
And when I was traveling, and I used them in my larger pots outside on our terrace in the city, and that worked well. It's trickier for smaller plants. For house plants, you wouldn't be able to necessarily stick a wine bottle with a spike in there.
Mhm.
But what you can do is, weeks at a time, I think you would probably need somebody to come in and water,
Mhm.
unless you're in a very humid spot. But I would group them together, maybe in a bathtub or in a sink, wrap a wet
Mhm.
towel around them, or put wet newspaper in and around.
Mhm.
And if it's a week, that probably should be okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's, obviously keep with house plants or any sort of plants, keep them away from a heating source or anything that's blasts the dry heat that will,
Right.
destroy
So,
them.
so one of the things I've done is getting those natural, the best way that I can describe them are like the car wash sponges, those
Mm-hmm.
thick natural sponges, and
Mm-hmm.
filling the bottom of a sink up to the height of that sponge and setting your plants on top of them. And the sponges keep it at the very least keeps some humidity and moisture going to the plant that they can absorb. It works really well with terracotta pots,
Great.
not so much plastic ones. But that's how I've been able to sort of, if I'm gone for 4 or 5 days, throw them
Mm-hmm.
all in a sink with that, and it just wicks the water right up through and keeps the
That's a
pot
great
moist.
idea.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Can somebody has a question? Can you talk more about? They said a worm bin, but a compost pile, an indoor one for
Mm-hmm.
creating. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a worm bin is there, you have different trays, right? So you need to put down some kind of, to make to make healthy compost, you need a mix of kind of brown ingredients and green ingredients. Brown meaning dried leaves, like black and white newspaper, don't use color, cardboard, any sort of kind of almost dead material, fall leaves, that sort of thing. The green material would be your vegetable scraps, if you're pruning some leaves away, anything that's kind of green and alive. So you want to kind of layer that to sort of make sure that you're mixing those two things together. So in a worm bin, you have a layer where you put down, newspaper, you have your worms, and you could put your scraps in, they do their thing and they'll eat through that. Their waste goes down, and then you kind of putting the new tray in, and then they'll then replace and sort of kind of mix and match from there.
So you
But
don't have to layer dead and fresh material for a worm bin.
I think you do. You need to do some of the newspaper, some sort of dry material as well. So
Okay.
it's not just wet, but they produce really great kind of fertilizer, which is wonderful. And that can be indoors, and you can find them at any sort of nursery, like, Gardener's Supply has them. And they're not too big, maybe 2-3 feet.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. And Melissa, do you get a large yield of herbs or vegetables from planting the seeds?
I do, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
If you start, sometimes I start them a little late and it doesn't always work out, but yes, I definitely do. And I highly recommend it. The good thing about seeds is you have a much greater variety of different varieties available that you would if you go to a local nursery or a big box store. So you can pick, there's tons of basil varieties that you can choose and cultivars. So it gives you a kind of a fresh start to kind of pick what you want.
Yeah, I think people have this view, if they haven't grown by seeds, that this tiny little seed, how much, but when you think about, even with a sunflower, like some of the heirloom sunflowers, that little seed can produce a giant, 12-inch head on it. So just because the seed is small doesn't mean that the plants won't be lush and prolific.
Oh, yeah.
And I can speak from a perennial perspective that when you're growing by seed, when the plant gets to be about, 6-7 inches tall, you can cut it back by half, and that will just bush out the perennial plant even more to produce more stems and more flowers. So
right. That's the thing with herbs. It's kind of cut and come again. You just keep clipping and you keep producing. I do that with my parsley, my basil, thyme, everything. Just the more you cut, the more they grow.
Yeah. What attracted you to Martha Stewart Living?
Well, same with you. I used to read her magazine in high school. My first job, I started at the Academy of American Poets, so a very different sort of role. But I would be late because I would sit and watch her show for 10 to 15. It was only going to be, I could watch it for just a few minutes, and then of course I'd get hooked, and so I would be late to work. But I just loved, she's just an inspiration. I think one thing that I've always admired about her is she's just always curious, always wants to know more, and wants to do everything, do it herself. She learns, she's a teacher, and she's been a tremendous inspiration. And continues to be.
I think for me, it really connected with me, the domesticity of it all. It's all sort of encompassing within living a really genuine, authentic, well-rounded life, right? So a lot of people who are into food may just be a chef, or a lot of people who are gardeners may just be into garden design. But it really inspired me to find within myself that doing all of these things and all encompassing in your home is really what creates a really fulfilling and connected home life. And it really just, it's, I've been watching her for so long, but and I love all the old shows, but they're
so great.
It's just somebody teaching how to do this at home versus everything in life is a profession. It really tells you how to make it personal to yourself.
Yeah, and I think you learn more. I love to cook, I love to eat, but I also, growing my own vegetables and herbs informs you a little more when you're in the kitchen and cooking. I think so. I think that all kind of helps connect. And she loves it. I mean, she's a real, and just going to her house and walking through her greenhouses or walking through her gardens, you just see kind of just a person who's so passionate about it. And we always talk about the joy of the doing, and that's exactly what it is. It may take a little longer to do it yourself, but you get so much pleasure out of it. It's so much fun. So.
That's right. All right, we'll get to, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Let's take one more question. Let's see. Do you have a favorite edible flower?
Oh, I love nasturtiums. I love borage, which you had just talked about, those purple flowers that are, it tastes like cucumbers. Those are amazing. Nasturtiums are peppery. Chive flowers are
Love chive flowers.
so good. I'm trying to think. I'm probably missing something obvious, but all of those I love.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a flower that I don't think tastes good. I mean, Pansies are delicious. I
Yeah,
mean, some of them
violets.
are a little bit more mild than others, and some have a very peppery taste to them. But I think adding flowers into any type of cooking and any type of display with entertaining on a dish that you might be serving or on a platter, it allows people to try it out and experiment for themselves. But I think they all taste really good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't eat anything poisonous, but
Right, exactly.
check before you eat.
Exactly. Well, so if there's any unanswered questions, guys, we will try to answer them offline. I will try to address some of them on Instagram on my stories. But I want to thank Melissa for joining us. It was so great having you here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And if you've missed part of the video or all of the video, or you want to rewatch it, it will be available on Aspire Design and Home website. It will also be on my YouTube page at Home with Joseph. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to my YouTube page and follow me on Instagram at Home with Joseph. And if you have any further questions regarding anything, whether it's for me or Melissa, I will forward them over to her and see if we can get her to answer some of them. And but thanks everybody so much for joining us. And again, thank you, Melissa, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you very much. This has been a real treat. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And happy gardening.
Yes. Bye.
Bye, everybody.